All right, so now we are moving on to the 12 castles variation within the tactical line. So after the standard Sveshnikov operations, f5, bishop e6, now we are looking at the move castles. Now, this move came into the fore sometime in the 90s, I would say, and became one of the biggest weapon from White's perspective against the Sveshnikov. And back then, every man and his dog would play this against the Sveshnikov. And then, as much as it was back then, the big hype, it then died out about 10 to 15 years later, and it never really resurfaced. So it's a very, very big, chunky, theory-heavy line that is really not that popular anymore, but we must do our best to cover these variations because they are very important, and they actually deal with a structure that I have been already kind of hinting at, as now we are going to engage with bishop takes d, ed. We often talk about this, that when the d5 square is abandoned by white, we should do our best to immediately exploit this. Now, the take is timely. We don't want to allow queen h5 and allow white to go back to those normal standard main lines. The point is that after take knight e7, now we would like to play bishop g7 castles and utilize the pawn majority on the king side. As you will see, these three pawns in particular pushed forward is going to be the very core of our kingside strategy, but that's not the only thing we are doing. The bishop on g7 is going to be a super obnoxious customer targeting b2, often popping up on e5, etc. And as I mentioned already in similar structures earlier, the presence of the opposite colored bishop means that whoever can find meaningful play on their bishop's color is very likely going to pull ahead. So with that in mind, now let's have a look at the variations. We are going to kick off proceedings with the move that seemingly refutes the whole entire business, which is going to be knight takes b5. And that might look indeed like a oopsie daisy. Okay, let's take some moves back, but no, worry not. Quite ironically, this capture is actually going to put white on the back foot almost instantaneously. And the reason for that is because now we play bishop g7, which develops the bishop and hangs the knight and prepares castling. And upon the retreat of the knight, we immediately set the board on fire, at least as far as the g7 bishop is concerned. And for the pawn, we are always going to get some really, really nice and meaningful counterplay on the long diagonal, on the BC files, etc. Let's have a look-see. Two bishop moves. If bishop e2, knight g6. Queen d2, castles. This is almost always the way we go. And now we again have a variety of ideas for white to go for. a4, I suppose, is trying to expand on the queen side. It has been played a number of times, so we need to cover it. Rook e8, that is a fairly obvious choice by us. We would like to play pawn to f4, but e4 needs to be covered. a5, then f4. And now both f3 and e3 are pending, super annoying threats, and this already highlights what this variation is all about as far as the black side of it is concerned. Again, I have got splits. This is going to be very chunky. So if rook a4, bishop takes c3. If now bc, then rook e5. Another move that I really want you to remember, it's going to pop up an awful lot in this line. The rook lift to e5 introduces pressure onto the d file, as well as desire to swing across to the g and pester the enemy king. And because if we manage to double the c pawns here too, structurally, I suppose that our position is pretty decent despite the material deficit. Queen g5 or queen h4 is what we're looking to do, and most certainly bully white on the king side. Queen c3. makes more sense to me to recapture on c3. But now we begin, or rather continue, I should rather say, our kingside demonstration. If bishop d1, queen g5. g3, queen g4. We don't need to be subtle about business. We just want checkmate. So queen h3, queen g2 will do. Rook e5. And we are gearing up for the stock standard mate operation of queen h3, rook g1, queen Saccharino, king takes, and mate. And white is more or less hopeless against this operation. And so, yeah, bishop d1 is not playable. gf is forced. Queen g5 chook. King h1. Knight f4. And again, the game is over, but at least we get to finish it in style, because after rook g1 comes the family fork. Take, 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 take. Thank you very much. And we are winning the chess game as we have an extra rook. That was a very, very cool intro into what our kingside ambitions are about in this line. Okay, so rook a4 was meh. The better move here is to play the prophylactic king h1 to try to sidestep at least some of our threats. Now we go to g5. The reason why we do this, despite the fact that queen h4 seems more natural, especially because we are self-pinning ourselves now with the f4 pawn, is because when the queen is on h4, then rook a4 now is very annoying. And the reason for this is because there is a what chess problem composers call a semi-pin on the fourth rank. So, for example, if I were to push the pawn up, they could just capture it, and now it's a full-blown pin. And that is quite annoying and obnoxious. Hence our choice, queen to g5. Rook g1, desperate defensive measures, e3. This is the reason why we do not worry about pinning the f-pawn, because now we tie our hopes with the e-pawn marching forward rather than the f1. Take, take, very nice. Queen e1, rook b8. I did tell you that we also often look to find play on the b file. This move also, by the way, introduces a potential rook leaf. Rook b1. Ha. Speaking of the devil. And white really, really needs to watch out here. For example, bishop a6, bishop e5. Now rook h4 is already looking extremely dangerous. So that is to be prevented at all cost. g3, bishop takes, queen takes, and now we pick off a super important pawn on d5, and then another very important one on a5, and all of a sudden material parity has been restored, and that white king is feeling a bit wonky. The engine claims that this position is equal, but I would say that from a human's perspective, we have got the easier play. That much is for sure. Nice. I like this. Good stuff. Okay. So a4, I don't know. It felt a little bit weak to me. Let's have a look at rook a e1. This tries to direct all attention to the king side. Sometimes white wants to play ideas like pawn f4, hoping that we would take en passant, and then the two rooks on the f and e file would be fully justified. We play rook e8. This is our typical modus operandi, defending e4, preparing f4. Now, if king h1, rook b8. We have seen this before as well. Bishop c4. It's a cute little way to try to cover up the pawn on b2, as rook takes b2 could be met by bishop b3 when our rook would be trapped on b2. So we go like, yeah, no worries. Let's switch back to the king side. Let's have some fun over there. Bishop a6. And now we can capture b2. a4. Rook a8. Bishop b5. As you can see, white is tying his hopes, her hopes, to the a4 pawn, and we are tying our hopes to immense piece activity. Bishop c6. Now, this bishop is quite annoying because it closes off the c file, and it introduces this very unfriendly idea of pushing the pawn all the way. And so we match their unfriendliness by creating a checkmate threat. G3, queen h5. Note how even our retreating moves often are game-winning threats. F4 is forced, and this is basically the move that white had been looking to play for a fair while, in fact, ever since they played rook e1. So this is where they would hope to utilize the rook placement. En passant, still, 91. This obviously tries to kick the rook and also can redirect the knight toward the king side via e3 or f2. Rook a2, queen f2. Now white is doing their best to pick off f3, and so we continue the attack f4. Queen f3, queen f3, rook f3, takes, takes, and knight e7. This is the key move that allows us to steady the ship. The bishop on c6 is now altogether dislodged, and we have got nothing to fear. Pawns are going to be dropping, and yeah, we're going to get a balanced, roughly equal endgame out of this. Very, very cool and interesting line. Okay, so this was king h1, which was quite prophylactic. The main line is g3. Obviously trying to say, I don't want you to play f4, and I also don't want you to play queen h4. So this is a kind of a move that tries to take some squares away from us. And of course, if our opponent says, I don't want you to play f4, the first thing we look at, altered Shankland rule, is to play the exact move that they were hoping to stop. Now, obviously, GF is not playable on account of multiple ideas. Queen h4, bishop h6 both look super dangerous. So bishop h5 is, again, an interesting idea, trying to once again exploit the positioning of the rook on e1. We take the knight, thus reducing the threats. And again, we have got two different captures, but now they switch around. Now queen c3 is the non-main line, where we have f3, queen d4, and f5. The pawn staircase kind of formation was already seen in a few previous lines, and it always gives me a visual joy to see that. It always makes me feel that white king can never ever feel safe. Queen e3 is necessary to stop queen g5, and then after the trade we would slither into g2. So that was necessary. And now f4, again the usual Sveshnikov let's go for broke attacking style. Granted, now the e4 pawn is no longer secure. So this is a bit of a do or die. Queen d4, queen g5. Take, and now we take with the queen, exactly because of what I said, to cover the pawn on e4. King h1 is more or less only to sidestep the queen f5, whoopsies, queen h3, queen g2 mate ideas. Take. Now they must take with the pawn, and tada, connected pass pawns. Hello. And we have got a fabulous position. Oh, loving life here. Absolutely loving life. Even if white manages to temporarily blockade them, because of the weakness of the white king, this should be pretty much terminal. And once again, even if they do get blocked, you have h5, h4 here to send forward to further soften up that white king and ultimately deliver the deadly blow. So, recapture on c3 is best advised with the pawn, so that the queen keeps an eye on f4, and now on g5 as well. So now black has got difficulty playing queen g5. Not anymore. Take, take. This is also a difference, that now white is on time to play h4 and then hide the king on h2, which would resolve all problems as far as the checkmate is on g2 is concerned. But there is more than one way to skin a cat, although this appears to be the exact same way. f5, f4 is pending. King h2, king f7. Awkward, but handy. Now f4 is once again on the map, and we don't need to worry about pins along the g file. c4, and the other benefit of king f7 is that we can switch plans up a little bit and we go like, okay, queen trade. And likely they are not going to accept that proposition because once again, these 3 pawns, mighty powerful. And you just simply pile up on the c, you win c4, then you double up on the c2 one, and the white pawns are going to be super easy to pick off one by one. Hence c3. Rook c8. Once again, we're threatening to take d4 and c4. And as such, I conclude here that we have got a better position with great winning prospects. f4 also is pending should the queen, for example, give a check and try to be a pest. Rook e7, you swing the rook to g8 and f4. Beaut. All right. Finally, in this position, we have got rook a b1 as the main line. A very ugly move, if we really want to be honest with ourselves, but a logical one. You are going to be shocked about our response, rook e8. Why change if it works? f4. Queen a5, now piling up on c3. Obviously, at this point, we weren't interested in taking, although in some cases, even that is an idea. But here it just seems better now to completely switch our attention to the queen side in style of a Benko gambit. g4. Now white is trying to explode the structure entirely on the king side. This is going to lead to some kind of equal position. Rook c8, and now we bring the knight. Bishop g4, protecting. Said pawn on f5. We take, and we take. And the position is going to fizzle out into a drawish endgame. Every single pawn falls, ultimately. Hitting that bishop. And yeah, I mean, this has been looking like a very, very drawish ending for the last 10 moves. Ever since the queens came off, it just looks like all queenside pawns will come off, securing a very drawish outcome. Okay, so what about if we put rook b1 to use and we go b4? It's quite ironic that in this position, b4 and g4 are white's 2 moves. Bishop takes c3. It's noteworthy that we don't shy away from this trade if there is a benefit associated with this. We have already seen it multiple times, that despite of the fact that I told you in the beginning that the dark squared bishop will be a mighty force to reckon with, but so is the fact that you can just trade it and pick off a pawn on a2 and then, God forbid, another one on d5. So queen b3 is logical to deny queen d5. We trade, we play rook b8. The idea is that now we want to pressure those pawns and preferably play a5 and provoke a push, which may sound counterintuitive at first, but if you think about it, now the pawns have become rigid and all of them are on white. If rook b1, then you trade, and now our objective should be to be able to blockade those pawns or win them. Either or is going to cut it, take, and win it again. And we are up a pawn. We have got knight, which is now beneficial because the pawns are all on the same wing. So we are looking great. No problems here at all. Let's go back to b5, though. This is the more logical way to play. a4. And now this is a little bit of a tit for tat kind of scenario where they hurt us with b5. We hurt them with a4. Knight e7. Guess where the knight is headed? Yes, you guessed correctly. We want to blockade. c4, knight c8. And the knight comes on time, and now the whole entire queenside pawn trio from white's perspective looks really not intimidating at all, as knight b6 and the pawn on d6 stay together, hold the entire batch, allowing us to pursue our own plans. An interesting endgame scenario is going to occur where it's tricky to make progress for either side. Now I couldn't push because the rook just walks me all the way to a2 and ultimately captures a2. So yeah, neither side really has a meaningful way to make progress. But due to the structural I don't know what to call it, deficiencies in white's camp, meaning the 3 pawns on d5, c4, b5 on white. If I had to, I would certainly pick black in this position. So back to the pawn capture on a2. Queen b3 didn't quite cut it. Rook a1 is also unlikely to cut it, as now we take rook a5 and queen e6. Now d5 is, of course, our plan. Queen d4, knight e7. Cheeky knight c6 threat is now planned, but of course we are also supporting the d5 push. Take, 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 knight c6, queen c3, and d5. And again, inside of the central pawn mass rolling forward, or at least threatening to roll forward right now, there is no way that black could be in any sort of trouble here. Okay, friends, a big, big move back. In fact, I'm going to now, no, actually, let's just stay here. So the knight went back to c3, we went d4, and we have been looking at the bishop e2 ideas. Now we look at bishop c4. You have seen already that in one line we did this bishop e2, bishop c4 swing for white in order to meet rook b with rook b2. So that suggests that going in one go to c4 makes a lot more sense, really. Castles, queen d2. If queen h5, then we are going to play queen c8. I want you to remember this move because I will show you this idea later on in a different line, the main line. And this is going to be one of our key ideas. And typically, it's a good rule of thumb to remember that when we move the queen to the c file, it far more often goes to c8 than to c7. And the reason for this is that we always want to keep an eye on this diagonal. Whether it's about guarding f5 or ambitiously playing for f4, queen g4, but the queen typically tends to stand better on c8 in these variations. Bishop b3, tuck, tuck. We have seen this idea also a million times. And f4. Now we can also come up via queen f5. But knight g6, rook e8 is perhaps the more standard version of playing this well. So knight g6, rook e5. You have seen it all, so you know what I'm talking about. Rook e1 is trying to hinder that plan, or at least delay it. So now we play f5, and we still want to play knight g6. Now, one benefit of playing f5 here, apart from guarding e4, and this is also a motif that does play a role in many Sveshnikov lines, is that the whole entire 7th rank has been opened up. And that makes queen c8 even more attractive because we don't have to worry about our rook, since after knight g6, we have got this super cool maneuver of coming here and here. And we are doing great. If f3, e3. Queen g5 check, knight g6, right on cue, defending f4, h4, queen d8. Take, take. And this endgame cannot possibly be worse for us. In fact, white must play accurately here with g3 to immediately undermine the structure. And after take f4. Knight g4, rook f3. And now we unfortunately have to drop g3. And these endgame scenarios tend to fizzle out, but I also tend to prefer them for black. Both sides have lots of weak pawns. Currently, we are down a pawn, but that's a double C pawn. The bishop on b3 is not that great. It's very likely going to fizzle out into a draw. Okay, so instead of queen h5, queen d2 again seems to me to be a more versatile move, keeping everything more tightly together. We're going to go on knight g6. And here we have rook e1 and king h1. If rook e1, queen h4. Cheeky little threat, e3, hitting queen and bishop. Oops. So b3 is logical. And now we swing across to e8. I want you to observe that A, how little we care about the fact that we are down a pawn on the queen side, and B, how even less we care about hanging a second pawn on a6 and just getting on with our kingside play. This is truly a magical feature of the Sveshnikov that we can just absolutely ignore these little unimportant details. Obviously, after bishop takes a6, you have multiple ways to attack. Knight f4, maybe one. Knight e5, knight g4, another. There are a fair number of ways to try to get to white very quickly. King h1 is best for sure. And after knight e5, black has a strong initiative. We are looking at the bishop. We are looking at here. Yeah, we're looking at all kinds of bullying methods here. So this position is looking golden. Okay, so king h1 is the main line. Again, prophylactically sidestepping a few threats, but that doesn't deter us from sending it. g3, queen up, bishop e2. Makes more sense now to bring the bishop back and cover these squares so that the knight cannot invade on either of those. Knight e5 nonetheless. Rook g1. This position apparently was played already in 15 games. Bishop a6. And now I've got two moves to offer for you. Queen d4, bishop g7 is a draw offer. If they dodge the draw offer, then they might get into a bit of a pickle. Queen f3 check is now super annoying. Knight d1. So the idea here is that after check rook g2, bishop c3 wins a piece on the pin. Power of the g7 bishop. And now we have got a nifty tactic. If knight takes, I will show you that. Sorry, if rook takes, then we're even winning with check, check. Whereas if knight takes, we have an easy perpetual check with rook b2, queen f3. And draw. So, yeah, that was queen d4. And as for queen d1, we're going to go king h8. Sidestepping the g5, preparing f4, preparing all kinds of aggression. Queen f1, bit of a dampener in our enthusiasm, but remember, we are not fearing the endgame, even pawn down, because the Benko-esque pressure down along these two files is incredibly powerful. The knight hates its life on c3. It can never move because of c2 hangs, and then we attack the b2 pawn, which can't move because then the knight hangs. A possible scenario, but by no means the only way to play, may look like this. And white is forced to give up material already with knight d1, rook c2, and we have got a balanced position, which is exactly what we like. And that, friends, brings us to the end of knight d5, and now we are moving on to the next batch with pawn c4. Rightio. So after castles, bishop d5, e5, knight e7, we're going to take a red hot look at c4. So previously we looked at knight takes at b5, which was one way for white to give meaning to the knight on a3. And c4, of course, is another very drastic attempt at immediately rerouting the knight from the edge towards the middle of the board. We are going to utilize here a Sveshnikov motif that we have seen throughout the course. In fact, in the positional line at bits as well. And we will certainly come across these variations in the Renegade section, which is going to be the final chapter of the course. So the idea is the typical Sveshnikov idea. Let's just give up the queenside pawns, gain some time to complete development, to push that e4 pawn in, to open up the long diagonal, and just have a field day. So, on that note, actually, taking on b5 is not even an option, or not best moves anyway. So, queen d2 is one of the optimal choices. The idea, of course, is to protect the the b2 pawn. So after take c4, I'm just demonstrating this to you. White is already in a world of hurt as bishop b2 is incoming. So queen d2 deals with that problem decently well. e4, bishop e2, and now we go b4 because we insist on them taking our pawns. We don't like them pawns, we like to push them. So queen b4 is obviously the most logical response. Knight c2 is a line, but after bishop takes b2, there is not a lot to talk about here, honestly, apart from the fact that now we did win a pawn, and yeah, it just looks very, very healthy for black. a5 going after that rook, a3, knight g6. And yeah, we are looking quite happy. Obviously, the queen on h6 is a bit of a pest. So ultimately, what we look to do here is to pull this bishop back to f6 and kick that queen out of h6. Off you go, queenie, and then we can castle safely. For example, AD, rook b1, and instead of clinging onto that pawn, we go like, nah. Off you go, lady. Queen h3. Obviously, queen g7 could be met by bishop f6 with a very drawish game, but we can try to play for a win with queen f6 as well. Queen h3. Queen f6, defending the pawn on f5. Knight c6. Tuck, tuck. And castles. And with all the dust settling on the queen side, now attention is going to be redirected towards the king side, and we know who the boss is on the king side. So white decides to trade queens with queen b2, and after the trade, they even want to trade rocks to ensure that desperately needed draw from their perspective, that is. Should be a draw, but bishop d4, bishop c5 still holds the white queenside pawns, and it still gives us practical chances to play for a draw. For a win, excuse me. Draw is guaranteed. So, yeah, after e4, bishop e2, b4, this should be captured, really, which allows us to castle. Now, rook b8 is becoming a threat. So, rook b1 is forced. Knight g6. I love it when that knight jumps to g6 and then it can go to e5, f4, h4, you name it. It's just, yummo, bring it. f4, I like this for white, by the way. If I'm black, I find this move a little bit annoying, but based on our piece formation, now there is not a lot to complain about because those delicious dark diagonals, we are having a field day here. Takes, and we can even afford capturing on b2, which looks suicidal on account of the pin, but observe how queen d4 is going to help us to get out of that pin without any dramas at all. Knight c2. Now, obviously, that denies queen d4, but it also lessens the pressure on the b2 bishop. And now we are going for a bit of a walkie with the knight. Also, we are getting ready for this g4 break, which is their best attempt to cause some trouble. Queen c5. We're sidestepping the pin. Takes. And we bring the piece back home to safety. Now, if rook b3, we go knight f5. Rook across, rook b2. Very annoying second rank pin. And after rook h5, we just simply pull back to e7. The white army is a fair bit disjointed for it to pose a realistic threat on the king side. We are going to play king h8, rook g8, and I think it's crystal clear that it's only black who can hope to have a superior position here. Right, so queen e3 instead of rook b3. The idea, of course, that if we take, they take back, and now the f5 pawn is defended, but this is a very temporary measure. Bishop d4 is going to kick the defender, and now f6 is best advised. If knight c2 after bishop c5, black is doing golden. Yeah, I think knight f5, bishop g4 looks a bit sketch, so I wouldn't be in a hurry to capture this. But yeah, f6 makes the most sense. Rook takes, bishop e3. And I know that this is going to look a little scary, but work with me here. The e7 pawn is going to be tamed fear not. Rook e8, rook b7, and king g7. This is the key move, king f6, and we're going to gobble up the pawn, and we are going to have a dead draw endgame. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so we've had a look at queen d2, and now we are going to have a look-see at the main line rook b1, or the main line of this subsection. Passive move, but it does the job. It defends b2. e4, of course, opening the diagonal as we like to do it. And now two bishop retreats are available, bishop c2 and bishop e2. Let's start with bishop c2. The benefit of doing this is that f4 is harder to carry out as the e4 pawn is under attack. Castles, take, f3. And this is also a way to try to exploit the positioning of the light square. Bishop white is trying to force some kind of structural weakness here, and that is actually the right strategy. Queen a5. Now we are putting b4 threats on the map and then picking off a2. King h1. Actually, I'm lying because b4 actually wins the piece. Because on knight c4, we have got queen c5 check. Oops. Hence, king h1. Bishop b2. I didn't tell you that threat, but that existed as well. Removing the defender of the knight. Rook b2, queen a3, rook b3, and queen c5. Keeping the b5 pawn still attacking a2. Takes, take on a2, and our piece activity, as usual, is off the charts. Bishop b1, rook f2. Being a pest is our way of life. ef, rook f1, queen f1, knight d5, and now too much material is coming off, so that it's very unlikely that we can claim it too much, but still we have got some annoying threats, and the d pawn after all is a passed one, so if anyone, it's black who can hope to be better here, but objectively this should be a draw. So bishop e2 then. The upside of this is that it keeps more pressure on the b5 a6 pawns and in general on that chain, but it lessens the presence or the attacking potential toward our central pawns. And so now we are going to exploit that. If queen d2 instead of cb, knight g6. cb, f4. ba, f3. Sveshnikov dreams and also textbook scenarios. White keeps on eating pawns, and we keep on pushing pawns until it's checkmate. Don't you love the Sveshnikov? gf, queen h4. The pending threats, bishop e5, knight f4. White's position is already a catastrophe. F takes e4, eating another pawn because that's what they do best. Bishop e5, we give checkmates because that's what we do best. f4 is the only legal move, and now white has to give up an exchange to avoid the mate, and even further defensive measures are required. I'm pretty much playing out only moves here, and this is pretty wild actually, this idea. f5. Now, it is already absolute bonkers city, by the way. We are on move 25. Memorizing all this is incredibly challenging. But the motives, friends, you want to remember motives. So what on earth is f5? We have seen this before. It's a rook lift. Just imagine a scenario where, let's say they take, I go here, something happens, I go here, something happens, and ta-da. Hello? So, yeah, these are the ideas and motives that will allow you to remember ideas, or equally importantly, to be able to recall ideas. Now, of course, we are threatening with queen g1. And there's not an awful lot white can do. Obviously, this was not a line. I just made it up to demonstrate the idea behind f5. The actual line goes as follows. E5, rook a7, queen e3, rook g7, knight c4. Not much difference, mind you, but at least queen f2 has been handled for the time being. But after king h8, something very interesting happened. White resigned. That was the game Kapra Schuster, an email, which is the new word for correspondence chess. The idea is the same: rook g8, queen f2, and that's it. We can also go knight f2, but queen f2 is prettier. What a game! What an absolute banger of a game. And again, this is just the epitome of the Sveshnikov, right? That our pawns are hanging on the queen side and just go like, no worries, mate. Actually, this is a different line. Yeah, queen d2 it was. And we just sacked the pawns on the queen side, then some pawns on the king side, but ultimately checkmate won the game. OMG, as the kids say, that was amazing. Right, so instead of queen d2, cb right away makes more sense. Now we retake. Now they take. If knight takes, then knight g6. Don't take on a2 because we get trapped with knight a3. King h1, f4. f3, e3. a4, rook e8. And you know where this is going? Rook e5, rook h5. And yeah, we have got some very, very nasty attacking prospects as a result of that rook e5, rook h5 maneuver. All right, so let's have a look-see at bishop takes, knight g6. And once again, the story is the same. All the white pieces are stuck over there, and we are attacking over here. And that bodes really well for us. Bishop c6, I really dislike this move. And as I just said, it flashes in my eyes that this is the engine's favorite move. So can't be that bad, but it just feels like that bishop can never return. f4 is absolutely imperative. I reckon if it's anything else, after we play f4, it's checkmate. So f4 played, 97. And now we have to hunt down that pawn, or rather the bishop, excuse me. But now those connected passes in the center, hello, that is going to be something. Unfortunately, so is the c7 pawn. And it seems that it is basically forcing a very drawish endgame with knight takes, bishop takes, queen, tuck, 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 and take on a2. Dang it. Turns out that the engine is smarter than me. Okay, fair enough. So that was bishop c6. If instead queen d2, then f4. And now white has a lot of reasons to worry. Getting mated is a quite valid reason. I mean, this just looks horrid, right? Queen d2 followed by queen e2 can't be good. Queen e7, king h1, king h8. Obviously, f5 is coming. The rook might now go to g8, and all g. Bishop c6 again is the main move. Knight c2, rook g8. Rook g1. Oh, that I always like it when that rook goes to g1. Knight h4, f3, f5. I can already smell the checkmate here. Knight b4, queen g5, queen f2, queen h6. Oh boy. Oh la 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 la. This can't be right. Bishop f6. Now we are preparing for various nasties. Rook g5, rook h5 is the favorite motif. On some rainy days, rook g3 may do the trick as well. It depends on what they do. Bishop e5. And now rook g3 is a threat. And consequently, we are completely winning. So basically, the winning idea is rook g3, rook g8, and bang on g2. The game's over. Just absolute beaut. Absolute beaut. Loving it. Absolutely loving it. So, if again bishop c6, rook b8, knight c4, f5. Same old, same old. If now a4, and they send it, we send it too. You know how this goes. Take rook b3. Oh, that's a feisty one. Amongst the many tempting attacking moves, this looks like a real nasty piece of work. Takes knight f4, and now the rook swings across. Ay. Bishop d4 is the plan, and then queen g5 or queen h4. Queen h4, gluing the rook to f1. The rook wants to come and help out, and we go like, no worries, can do. We prefer checkmate. Thank you very much. Ay. Oh man, imagine when your biggest problem with the black opening repertoire is to remember which checkmate attack to gear up for in order to win your game. The problems of the Sveshnikov player. Alrighty. So, a4, that was very naive. f3, slightly better, trying to weather the storm. But as you will see, this is going to lead to some quite wild attacking scenarios as well. e3, queen back. I mean, this again is looking as horrid as it can. Bishop d4. And the plan is pretty simple. Double up on the g, take g2. And sign the score sheet indicating you won the chess game. Bingo. Righto, friends. So, that was c4 for us. We have got two more to have a hot look-see at. Bishop d5, ed, knight e7. We have dealt with knight b5. We have dealt with c4. And now we are looking at rook to e1. This is a key idea. White wants to facilitate a bishop f1 drop back and occasionally follow that up with g3 and then bishop g2 or bishop h3. From the previous variations, you could tell that it's a fairly sizable problem for white, that more often than not, they end up getting checkmated. And so this move tries to avoid that scenario by delegating a defender, an extra defender, to the king. So let me go back a bit. So rook e1, bishop g7, e4 is threatened, so c3 has to be played. And now we go queen d7. That is a fairly unusual square for our queen, by the way, but now there is no reason to put it on c8, since the c-file shenanigans are less important. Knight c2 will be our main line here. Bishop f1 is met by castles. Knight c2, rook b8. This is an important move, as is often the case in the Sveshnikov with rook b8, but as we are anticipating a4, which now would be captured, and then b2 would be hanging. Still, a4, we take. Rook a2, a5. We don't want to so easily give up now that pawn. Make them work for it. Two knight moves. If knight e3, then a3. It's always a very clever move to throw the pawn away in a way that ruins white's structure. And now we are back to our usual business. e4, bishop c3, rook e2, and f4. Know that forcing the rook to e2 has created some very awkward scenarios, bishop blocked, queen blocked, back rank vulnerable, etc. f5, and I'm loving life already with black here. Knight d4, now that is too good a piece, so see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. And after knight g6, we can call it a day here. All of our pieces are superior to whites, excuse me. The knight in particular is going to be an absolute menace once it pops on e5. But again, the back rank is weak, f3 is pending, and white has no play. White has no play. So it's only us who can be. Even the endgame with queen g7 is better for us. So happy days. So instead of knight e3, we can go to a3. That doesn't look much better either, but at least it stops the pawn a3 idea that we had before. Rook ac8, knight c4, fc8, excuse me, and rook c5. Now that's a new motive. So typically what we saw in this line is that when we went after the d5 pawn, we usually did that rook e8, rook e5. But in this case, this is faster and easier. And now we even keep the queens on the board before we capture the pawn on d5. Knight back, e4. The script doesn't change just because the pawns came off. The position is claimed to be balanced, but based on, our attacking desires, I think we can agree that black is probably in a slightly favorable spot, at least from a human's perspective. Right, so after rook e1, let me go back again. So rook e1, bishop g7, c3, queen d7. We looked at bishop f1, mainline knight c2. Castles. And now we have got g3 as the main move. a4 is also possible when we go e4, bishop f1, and take. Knight e3, rook b8. These rooks. Knight c4, rook b3. Rook a2, rook b8. And it turns out that white's ambitions on the queen side turned out to be pretty sad. And white did not manage to recuperate the sacrificed pawn. b2 is constantly under pressure. Knight on e7 is yet to join the fray. Knight g6, knight e5 is the most likely way. And yeah, we are just very happy. So let's go g3. f4. Now that is almost always like an invitation to bite. And bite we do, f4. GF, it doesn't make too much sense to not to take this. I think this is white's best course of action. And of course, as usual in the Sveshnikov, once we throw one f pawn away, we send the other one to follow. f5. And now we have got fe and knight e3. If fe, then de, keeping those pawns together so they can march up. a4, e4. Bishop e2, b4. Just when you thought, oh, we haven't sacked the pawn for the last 10 seconds. Well, okay, let me not disappoint you. Knight b4, rook f6, and we absolutely know the drill already. The rook's king h8 coming, rook g8 coming. All the heavies are joining the fray. White is in a very, very, very serious trouble here of getting checkmated rapido. So, 93 is potentially the better way to go. We go e4. And now we have got a zillion bishop moves to discuss. 3. Bishop f1, knight g6. The attacking patterns remain the same. Knight g2, bishop h6. King h1, take. Take, take. And we are very happy. And they are less happy. We would like to play rook a e8, king h8, and yeah, we are all good. If queen d2, you just drop back to g6, and then you can relocate the knight on e5 if need be. Okay. If bishop e2, still knight g6, still bishop h6. The pattern, the mantra is the same. Queen d2, king h8. King h1, queen e7. The idea behind queen e7 is that we would like to eliminate the defender on g2 by playing knight h4, and then the queen from h4 will support the h6 bishop in capturing the pawn on f4 with a superior position. So rook g1, rook g8. It also helps us to block the check if need be. Rook f1, knight h4. Takes, takes, check. And we have got a draw with move repetition. And I think it is white who is very happy with said draw. The final bishop retreat is bishop c2. Knight g6, Same old, same old. Now, if f3, which is in logical sync with bishop c2, then we take f4, they take e4, we take back, and typically these scenarios tend to work out well for us, as the white king usually is more exposed than ours. Even after the absence, or rather the trades of the queens, I think there are some annoying motives that white has to deal with, such as knight h3 check, followed by taking the rook on c1. And look, that king is always a little bit upsetty. Only move to avoid the disaster is bishop g2, check. Note that here we already have a draw with knight h3 if we wanted to. Perpetual check. But knight d3 is the gutsy way, shutting the rook out. And now we are threatening knight f4. Ay, ay, ay. Or even king h8, rook g8. Black is better. Pawn down and solidly better. That's the Sveshnikov power, baby. Sveshnikov power. Down a pawn in an endgame, but your king is weak. Happy days. Righto. And last but not least, so after e4, bishop c2, knight g6. If they go still knight g2, as they should, bishop h6 again, king h1, knight f4, tuck tuck, f3, and after rook f6, again, we have got the better attacking prospects, in particular with rook h6 coming, and then we should be very good. King h8, rook g8. The bishop will always fend off the check from e5 if the queen comes up to d4. We are looking very, very cool here. And with that, ladies and gents, I have wrapped up for you rook e1 as well. And now there is only one thing we need to have a red hot look-see at, and that is going to be, of course, the biggest main line with pawn to c3. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, so c3 is what is left for us to deal with after the capture on d5. c3, bishop g7, hardly a surprise. And we are going to dominantly spend the rest of our time on the move queen h5, another typical Sveshnikov move from the white side. But first, let's have a quick look-see at knight c2, which immediately justifies the move c3. Castles, and a4. If queen h5 now, then we can go e4. Bishop e2, king h8. And again, we're just following stock standard operations as per usual. Take, rook b8. Very common method when a6 is hurting. Let's hit b2 as a countermeasure. Knight b4 and a5. Knight c6. And this is going to be a more or less forcing sequence with take on b2, bishop d1, queen c8. We want to gobble up the c6 pawn. It's very important that we get rid of with that. We also are, by the way, guarding f5 here. And every single pawn is disappearing from the board. But we are a pawn to the good here, guys. e3, of course, is very handy in opening up the white king a little bit. And after queen e5, likely a queen trade will take place. And we have a chance to squeeze this endgame forever. Objectively, though, white should be able to hold the draw here. So if a4, as I announced, which makes more sense to me, then e4, bishop e2, and take a4 again. Now, rook a4 is the most logical move. Knight e3 doesn't really seem to match well with a4, but have a look at it. f4, knight c4, f3. Every time we have a chance to just f5, f4, f3, we should always consider doing it. It's a really annoying operation that opens up white's king. Take, rook a4, knight g6. And again, like you have seen it already 20 times. We want to put a queen on h4 or g5, knight on f4, bishop may come to e5, rook a7, rook g7. The whole story is just stock standard ideas that we have already seen. queen c2, queen g5, and by now I'm sensing that this could end really, really badly for white, God forbid, in a checkmate very soon. So lovely position for us. So again, rook a4 is the logical move once you committed to a4, rook b8, same old, same old. And now after rook a2, I will show you what to do. First, knight b4. Again, same story. We eat b2 and we eat c3. But now c6 remains. So that's definitely a bit of a problem. So observe how we are now up material. But the c6 pawn is definitely a bit of a pest. g3, rook b4. Bishop back to b3. Takes, takes, and queen b6. We're trying to activate as best as possible, and we are hoping to play e3 next. We have got a promising position, but objectively, the presence of the c6 pawn should secure white here very serious drawing chances. And so rook a2 is our main idea, and f4 again. Just go, go, go. If f3, then queen b6 check, and we have got the super annoying queen b3. Ay. This is definitely not pleasant. Knight b4 is not playable here on account of the cool tactic rook b4, and a2 is hanging. So something ugly needs to be played like rook a3, and we start cherry picking. Bang, bang. Let's trade the rook off. Let's take c3. And now, if they don't capture the a-pawn sooner or later, they will be in a world of hurt. So rook f3 first, back, take, knight g6. And we have got level material, but the position is actually preferable to black despite the 4 isolated pawns, because bishop h6, knight e5 is going to allow us a piece arrangement like no other, and then the rook can get activated via b8, b2, so we are still calling the shots. Right, so after f4, king h1 is the other move, anticipating f3. Now we go knight f5, knight b4, and queen g5. Building up towards f3, knight h4, etc. By the way, the point of going via f5 instead of the usual g6 here, I forgot to point out to you this, is that it denied knight d4 as well. Because typically we go via g6 so that rook e8, rook e5 can come, but here knight f5 is potentially a little bit more precise. Knight c6, rook e8, rook a6, and we have got the ultimate Sveshnikov scenario, king h8, and just build, and then attack. Rook g8 is about to come, so bishop g4 makes sense. Knight h4, g3, and back. Now white is far less likely to take on f5 because of the weak light squares. So they take on f4, we take, they still trade, but now very, very difficult defensive tasks are awaiting for white. Rook g8, c4. The main idea behind this operation was to bring the rook back into the defense, in particular to g3. Takes. Rook e3 is also quite possible. And we are calling it off here. Obviously, black has the initiative. But yeah, white is still in the game. So yeah, an interesting dynamic equilibrium. Okay, let's go main line. Queen h5. e4. Whenever we can push that in with a tempo, we do so. Bishop c2 and castles. And now we have got rook e1 and rook a d1. Rook a d1 is less impressive. Now we go rook c8, and the threat is b4. And so white needs to respond now with either bishop b3 or bishop b1. if bishop b3, then f4. Note the logic here. The bishop abandoned the e4 square, so we're good to go. And white is in a world of hurt because f5 is coming, and we have got a marvelous kingside initiative, and the two minor pieces on the queen side do absolute hot nothing for white. So bishop b1 makes more sense. Now rook c5. Now the problem is the d5 pawn. The bishop on b3 was covering that. Now it isn't. If knight c2, we just pick off the pawn. Thank you very much. If rook e1, rook e8. What we're trying to do here is to prepare a timely rook e5. What you need to observe here is that after takes, I believe I can take this because I have this trick. This is the one you don't want to fall for. And that's why we are doing this rook e8 operation first. Yeah. Knight c2, knight d5, queen f5, and rook e5. So note here too, knight c3 is a terrible blunder because of takes. So instead we go rook e5, queen back, and knight f4. And now white is really, really in a lot of trouble because knight d3 for one thing is a super annoying threat. But to top it, if they go to the g file, then they actually walk into this tactic as well. Ay. That's once again the Sveshnikov vibes. Right. So rook ae1 is our line. And this is where we are going to see the key move of this variation again. I already spoke about it earlier on. Queen c8. Very, very important move to remember. The queen covers the f-pawn, allows knight g6, puts pressure on the c2 bishop by threatening b4 takes, bishop takes b2, hitting knight and bishop. And last but not least, it also allows the black queen to slide up to c5 at times. And now we have got a quadrazillion lines. Let's go one by one. G4 is super ambitious, but very risky. B4, take. Queen G5 check, has to. And that's the only saving grace for white. Otherwise, they would lose the game. Knight G6, GF, bishop takes, bishop E4. And now we are headed for a very drawish scenario. Queen D8. If Queen D2, Rook B8 is going to save our bishop ultimately via B4. Constant attack to distract white from attacking our bishop on A3, bishop G2, and finally the rescue operation, A5. Take, check, and that bishop is an absolute monster. In fact, white here even needs to watch out to not to be worse. Marvelous play by black. So Queen D8 is more likely. In this variation, we take back, and this endgame is very, very drawish again. Rook takes B4, Rook A3, and all pawns just come off. Rook E5, Rook D5, unstoppable. The game's a draw. Easy peasy. Okay, G4 was a bit wild. If F3, we go B4 again. This is our main threat. Knight B1, Knight G6. Take F4. Our favorite dark squared blockade policy. We are going to put something on E5. Wow, look at my arrows. And pursue kingside initiative. Knight E5 this time. Probably it makes more sense, by the way, to put the knight on E5. Queen E2, Queen C5 check, King H1, Rook B8. And as usual in the Sveshnikov, we are treating our pawns very liberally when it comes to sacking them away. And instead, we focus, as usual, on piece activity, which right away is off the charts again. Rook b2 is a tremendous threat. White is really, really feeling under the pump here, despite the 2 extra pawns. Bishop b1 is a very sensible way to try to dodge b4. And so we now change plans. Rook e8, knight g6, rook e5, etc. Is our main idea. Note that there's a little cheeky tactic. Knight d5 can be met by bishop e4, fe, and then queen d5. We do not want this. Rook e8, f3, check, and e3. Once again, observe how fortunate it was that we put the queen on c8 at the right time. f4, white must split the pawns so that they can hunt down e3. Knight d5, queen f5, and this is the time when you don't get scared, because h7 is simply a check, nothing more, and so you ignore it. b4 is the threat. Check, king f8, bishop d3, and knight back. Queen h3, e2. That's a beautiful clear and sacrifice. We are looking to incorporate our knight into the attack via knight e4. For example, take, 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 knight e4. And again, look at that piece activity. So good. Bishop f6, forcing everyone back to the Stone Age, and rook e8. White needs to be extremely precise to stay alive. Knight c2, and now comes a simplifying tactic. Take, 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 and we are going to regain e2. Queen h4. Okay, 2. And we have got a complex position. Apparently, the ancient thinks it's equal. Good luck to any humans who come across this. I was thinking here about what the best way might be to deal with rook f2. And I'm yet to reach a conclusion. But I think simply trying to get the queen onto the e-file may be sufficient enough. Alternatively, I found a very, very, very cool idea. Not sure if it works, but if the rook were here, we would have this incredible... No, we wouldn't actually. Never mind. Yeah, rook f2 is a bit of a question in my head as to how we treat it. I mean, worst comes to worst, 94, 93 is always a perpetual withdraw. We might not have a better one than that. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Oh, actually, no, wait. 94 is going to pick off c2. So, yeah, we've got that covered too. Okay, problem solved. I like to understand what I'm doing. Yeah, all good. Okay. Bishop b3. Defending d5. Rook e8. Plan is knight g6 as always. Knight c2. a5. Now that's a rare move in this context, limiting the knight and threatening a4. Hello, that's neat. a3, knight g6. f4, more or less a must, otherwise we play f4 and God save white. En passant, take, take, and f4. Even when the pawns are doubled, they need to be pushed, and they represent serious source of counterplay. This was, by the way, a simultaneous game between a dude called Bucher against Kramnik from Zurich, 1999. Black is doing fine. Rook a7 is a plan. Bishop e5 is a plan. We're fine. And the main line. Queen c8, king h1. b4 again. Our favorite pawn break. Now, knight b1 is simply met by knight g6. f3, take, and now 2 takes. If knight, we trade. We tend to do this all the time. Fe, don't take the bishop because of ef and consequences. Just go f4. And go blockade. And although we are down a pawn, I would definitely prefer to be black here every day of the week. With the infiltrating rocks and the superior knight on e5, nothing could possibly go wrong here for black. So bc is probably better. Take rook e2. Now we retreat, take e4 and f4 again. The panels, friends, these building blocks, like we always push past. We like to play f5, f4, f3. These building blocks help you so much to figure out these lines, even if you don't remember. And here after rook c7, with the plan of rook c1, white is in a bit of a trouble. So b4 is best met by take rook e3. More or less everything else is losing here, because the knight is hanging, and if the knight moves, then we cash in on the bishop on c2. In fact, this move is not so much defending the knight, although that too, but it actually prepares a very unusual, I would even say, kingside attack. Bishop g7, we come home, we prepare h6. Now if rook d1, a5. b5, queen c5. b6, trying to divert queen, knight d5. Queen f5, knight e3. Take. And this pawn sack is going to yield very, very nice things to us. Bishop e4, rook e8, bishop d5, c3. And although the position is a hot mess, the c3 pawn seems to secure a more preferable position for black. So after bishop b3, after bishop g7, if instead of rook d1 we go bishop b3, as in they do, guarding d5, we go rook b8. And now I've got still 3 lines to go through. Queen g5 is met by knight g6, knight c4, h6, queen h5, knight f4. The constant pestering of the queen is what we like to do here. And finally pick off d5. Now we need to secure the king against the pin. Take. Here, admittedly, the white heavy pieces are very active, and somewhat uncharacteristically, we are up by several pawns. But hey, sometimes we have to take the side where the initiative is theirs, and we have got the pawns. I still like black. Queen c5 is likely going to be... Queen c5, queen e5, actually, is the best operation to try to hold the position together. g4 is possible, but perhaps overeager. Rook b4, gf, queen f. Queen e2 back, a5. Obviously planning a4, knight c2, rook back. Rook e4, knight g6. And material is level. We have got bishop e5 incoming, knight f4 incoming. Our position is looking very, very healthy. Final move. Knight c2, trying to defend b4, a5. Love it that every time you have a tactical strike. Now ba, of course, loses to rook takes b3, and we pick off c2. And so, if rook e1, we take, g4 again, f4. Rook e4, knight g6. We managed to keep the g5 closed. We managed to keep the e5 square rolling. Happy days. Queen c5 can be played at times. And yeah, it's very, very unpleasant for white because they are desperately lacking a good plan here to play for. If rook g1, preparing g4, we go a4. Bishop takes, knight takes. Very timely operation. Now, rook g3 is well met by knight f4. Note that now any kinds of queen g5, queen h6 can be met by knight g6. like so. And we are going to be looking fab. Rook h3. Note that the bishop can't take on d5 because c2 hanging. h6. Tuck, 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 tuck. And f4. Queen c3, threatening queen f3 check. And unfortunately, this now will have to fizzle out into a perpetual check. Otherwise, white would force it with rook takes g6 anyway. So if white he goes right away to h3, mate threat, then we are in our main line. h6, rook g3, king h8, and knight e3. If takes, we take back. Knight d4, knight e7. Sometimes, very rarely, we have to defend in the Sveshnikov. g4, fg. Now if rook takes, then we would play king h7. So now white is trying to plonk something on e6. Like so. Very clever. Take, queen g4 check. Luckily for us, it's still not going to be good enough. Check, check, and we run for the hills. Rook f6. And one of the funniest lines will come to its unfortunate end from our perspective, because after all, it turns out that we cannot escape the checks. Very, very sad, but true. And perpetual check is going to be the name of the game. Queen h5 check, and yeah, check's gone forever. Okay, if knight e3, main line, knight f4. And now white is overcooking it. Take, take, take. And we have got this fabulous fork. Knight to e2. Yes, it hangs g7. No, we don't care. Take, take, take. Back rank mate. Bishop hangs. Loose pieces. And it is the loose pieces that will decide the outcome of this game, as now the f5 knight is hurting, and consequently so is the rook on g7. And friends, that concludes this massive batch of the 12 castles line. And for the last big batch of the tactical line with bishop d3, we are going to look at with ef5 ideas in the next chapter. So let's dive into that.